Hello students, let us study international trade policy. The topic for today is tariff, its types, partial equilibrium analysis of tariff and effect of tariff on consumer and producer surplus. Let's begin with the introduction. International trade will take place if it gives benefit to all. If trade is free, benefit would be maximized. It means that free flow of trade leads to more benefits, but nations protect domestic industries through restrictions and regulations. A set of these restrictions and regulations is known as trade policy. Governments may impose tariffs to raise revenue or to protect domestic industries from foreign competition. Such policy affect the flow of international trade. Let's define tariff. A tariff is a tax imposed on imported or exported goods and services. It is a tax levied on commodity when it crosses a national border. An import tariff is a tax imposed on an imported commodity. An export tariff is a tax on exported commodity. An import tariff is a common tariff and an export tariff is a less common tariff. Let's discuss the types of tariff. The first, ad valorem duty. This tax is legally specified as a fixed percentage of the value of a commodity imported or exported. In other words, it is a fixed percentage of the value of the traded commodity. Let's take an example. Suppose an ad valorem duty is 10% and the value of import is $200. Therefore, an importer of commodities must pay a $20, that is 10% of $200 import duty to the government. If import prices rise, ad valorem duties also rise and this aggravates the protective effect. If prices fall, the protective effect will be reduced. Specific duty. This tax is legally specified as a fixed sum of money per unit imported or exported. In other words, it is a fixed sum per physical unit of the traded commodity. Let's discuss an example. An Indian importer of a Japanese car may be required to pay $2,000 import duty to the government of India, irrespective of the price of the car. Specific duties are not affected directly due to increase or decrease in the prices. Ad valorem duty is more progressive in nature than specific duty. The specific tax is regressive in the sense that it imposes higher burden on the cheaper commodities. The specific duty is easy to apply, whereas an ad valorem duty can be calculated after the value of commodity is determined. Compound duty. This is a combination of an ad valorem duty and specified duty. Let us take an example. An Indian importer of a Japanese car may be required to pay $2,000 plus 2% of the value of car. Partial equilibrium analysis of tariff. We assume that the nation which imposes an import tariff is a small nation. It means that tariff cannot affect the international price of the commodity. The nation is a price taker in the world market. The effect of an import tariff can be explained as follows. An imposition of a tariff on imports leads to increase in domestic price of imports. That results in the domestic output of import competing industry expands and domestic consumption of imports contract. As a result, imports fall because the gap between domestic consumption and domestic production reduces. It means that an imposition of tariff on imports reduces the domestic consumption. The tariff revenue will be collected by the government and the income is redistributed from consumer to producers. The partial equilibrium analysis is explained in figure. We measure quantity of commodity X on x-axis and price of commodity X on y-axis. Now, dx is the demand curve of the commodity X, which has a negative slope. It shows the domestic demand for commodity X in a particular nation, say A. Now, Sx is a supply curve of commodity X which has a positive slope. It shows that domestic supply of commodity X in nation A. In the autarky situation, E is the autarky equilibrium point at which the price of commodity X is $25 per unit. Now, we assume that international price of $10 per unit. This is shown by the PW line. This is the perfectly elastic foreign supply curve of commodity X to nation A under free trade condition. It means that nation A cannot affect the international price. Now, at international price $10, the domestic consumption is 150x, that is AH. At this price, domestic production is 30x, that is AC. The remainder of 120x, that is CH, is imported. Let's understand the effect of an import tariff. Suppose nation A imposes a tariff of $5 or 50% on the imports of commodity X. As a result, domestic price of commodity X rises. This is depicted by the upward shift price line PW plus T. Therefore, price increases from $10 to $15. At the price of $15, the domestic consumption is 125x, that is BG. Nation A produces 45x, that is BD, domestically. The remainder 80x, that is DG, is imported. The effect of increase in price can be explained as follows. Consumption effect. According to consumption effect, an increase in the price of commodity X reduces consumption of domestic consumers from 150x to 125x. The reduction of 25x is shown by IH. This is the consumption effect. Production effect. As per the production effect, an increase in the price of commodity X increases the domestic production by 15x, that is 30x to 45x. This is depicted by CF. This is the production effect. Trade effect. An imposition of a tariff causes imports to fall from 120x to 80x. It means that imports have fallen by 40x, that is HI plus CF, which are equal to increase in domestic production by 15x, that is CF, and decreases in domestic consumption by 25x, that is HI. This is known as trade effect. Revenue effect. After the imposition of the tariff, the government collects $5 into 80x, that is $400, as depicted by area DGIF. This is known as the revenue effect of the tariff. Let us understand consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is the difference between the willingness to pay and actual payment of a consumer. Graphically, consumer surplus is measured by the area under the demand curve above the market price. Let us take an example. If consumer is ready to pay $10 for 1 unit of commodity X and actual price is $4, then consumer surplus is $10 minus $4, that is $6. An increase in price reduces the consumer surplus. The effect of tariff on consumer surplus can be seen from the diagram. We measure quantity of commodity X on x-axis and price of commodity X on y-axis. Before the imposition of tariff, consumer in nation A consumes 150x at PW, that is 10. At point R, consumers in nation A would be willing to pay NR $32 for the 45th unit of commodity X, but under free trade conditions, they pay only NT, that is $10. In this situation, consumer surplus is $32 minus $10, that is $22. Similarly, for the 125th unit of commodity X, consumers would be willing to pay GK, that is $15, since they only pay IK, that is $10. They receive a consumer surplus of IG, that is $5. For the 150th unit of commodity X, consumers would be willing to pay HL, that is $10. This is equal to the price they actually pay. Therefore, the consumer surplus for the 150th unit is 0. Before imposition of tariff, consumer surplus is equal to AMH, that is half of $30 into 150x, that is $2,250. This is the difference between what consumers would be willing to pay, that is OMHL, and actual payment of OAHL, that is AMH. When nation A imposes an import tariff, the price of commodity X rises from $10 to $15. The domestic consumption decreases from 150x to 120x. Therefore, the consumer surplus falls from AMH to BMG. In this situation, let us discuss producer surplus. Producer surplus is the difference between the amount a producer of a good receives and the minimum amount the producer is willing to accept for the good. The difference is the benefit the producer receives for selling the good in the market. This difference is known as producer surplus. Graphically, producer surplus is measured by the area above the supply curve and below the market price. Let us take an example. A producer is willing to sell 50 units at $5 each and consumers are willing to purchase these for $8 each. If the producer sells all the units to consumers for $8, it receives $400. Producer surplus is the difference between the amount the producer received by the minimal amount it was willing to accept, in this case $250. Therefore, the producer surplus is equal to $400 minus $250, that is $150. The effect of producer surplus is clear from the figure. We measure quantity of commodity X on X axis and price of commodity X on Y axis. At free trade, price of X is $10. Domestic producers produce 30x and receive OACR, that is $10 into 30x, that comes to $300. An imposition of tariff increases the domestic price of X from $10 to $15. This will increase domestic production from 30x to 45x. They receive OBDS, that is $15 into 45x, that is $675. An increase of revenue by $375 is decomposed in two parts, RCDS and ABDC. RCDS shows the increase in their production cost, whereas ABDC is producer surplus. Let's summarize today's session. Tariff is an instrument to protect domestic industry from foreign industry. There are mainly three types of tariff. Import tariff is most common among nations. Tariff affects the nation's domestic consumption and production. An imposition of tariff by a small nation reduces the domestic consumption of importable commodity and increases the production of domestic production. An import tariff also reduces the imports of the nation. An imposition of a tariff decreases consumer surplus and raises producer surplus. Thank you.